Cyclonic winds affecting the Cairns region of Australia on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for December 13th. Still one storm active all around the world, and it is just Cyclone Jasper, but it is making up its final run towards landfall, which we expect will occur not far from Cape Tribulation in northern Queensland in the next 24 hours. Code yellow for that storm. In the Atlantic, there's no areas of interest, thankfully. It's off season, 171 days until we start again for next year. But until the end of this year at least, we're still on the 2023 naming list, and its total numbers, 19 tropical storms formed this year. In the Eastern Pacific, we're all done here as well, hopefully. Nothing active here, just a lot of cloudiness over the very low latitude regions there. We reached 17 tropical storms this year in the Eastern Pacific, 154 days until we start again. In the Western Pacific, it's not over. There's still an area of interest that we've now reclassified at 20% that could be heading on towards the Philippines and could become a tropical cyclone before it gets there within the next 5 days. In the southern hemisphere, moving over to the southwest Indian Ocean, it's cut off on the imagery today, but we do have a 20% chance that could end up developing in the southwest Indian Ocean and could end up turning towards the Mascarene Islands next week. So that's an area of interest that should start becoming more apparent late this week. Of course, we've got Jasper, which is very close now to making landfall in Queensland, Australia, obviously reaching its very powerful intensity. It feels like quite a long time ago now. It was a category 4 at one point. It's now still 60 miles per hour or nearly 100 kilometers per hour. And a 20% chance that we've designated further east, just east of the international dateline in the South Pacific, a system that could be heading towards Samoa next week. We're giving a 20% chance it could be a quick spin up of a storm that could develop there. Well, as for Jasper, we have a cyclone warning still for Cardwell to Cape Melville, inland as far as Palmerville and Chilago. It is 113 kilometres from Cape Tribulation, 123 from Cooktown, 141 from Port Douglas, 162 from Cairns, and 187 from Mariba inland. The cyclone watches that were in effect have been absorbed into the warning zone, and there are no further watches that extend further inland because they're expecting that the storm will actually die off very quickly before it reaches any further areas. So here it is on satellite imagery right now, and to be honest, it is looking much better today. There were indications from models for days that this system would start intensifying just before it reaches its landfall, and that may be what we're starting to see. Still very far away from being a complete package, especially on that eastern side, but it sure looks, with those strong cloud top convection regions there on that western side, that is going to be absolutely producing lots of rainfall over that area right now, over Cairns indeed, and some strong winds which will be approaching certainly into gale force, and with maximums approaching around 90 kilometers per hour. More satellite imagery here. You can find that live on the Force 13 website. We've also got an automated stream running in real time all the way through this storm's life. You can find that on the Force 13 YouTube channel. Looking at infrared imagery, certainly that western side has been bubbling up much better than the eastern side, and little signs of possibly an eye feature there, but that's just the convective pattern. But certainly that center is quite strong as we look at it on the radar imagery, getting quite close now already by the looks of things here, and that could be a landfall later on this evening. Now this is the Invest in the Western Pacific, Invest 91W, and actually it looks worse today than it did yesterday, even though we've now just marked it. Certainly nothing to describe as anything remotely cyclonic at the moment, as it persists over the Micronesian islands. Eastern Pacific, very warm still in one or two spots, over 30 degrees Celsius off the coast of Mexico. We've got the loop current in the Atlantic, which is still providing warm water into some of the Gulf of Mexico, but certainly around the United States those temperatures have now taken a nosedive, as we expect at this time of year. Western Pacific still holding on to some warm waters in those lower latitudes, pushing close and above 30 degrees Celsius around Palau and east of there through the Micronesian islands, and still extending significantly to the north. Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal, still got some good temperatures there, especially further east. The Arabian Sea also very warm off the coast of India near the Maldives, over 30 degrees Celsius. The southwest Indian Ocean is also warming up continuously off the coast of Madagascar. There's now one little area there of 30 degrees Celsius. Around the Mauritius and La Réunion, it's around 27 degrees, but still rising. Off the coast of Australia, it's baking hot, just off the northern tip of Western Australia and near the Northern Territory, over 32 degrees in one or two little spots there. Coral Sea, a little bit cooler of course after Jasper, but still looking decent, and the South Pacific still warming up there as well, 28 degrees, 29 degrees reaching Fiji and Samoa. Let's take a look at the anomalies then. This is compared to average. The orange zones denote warm anomalies above average. You'll note clearly in the Coral Sea though that it is below average there, mainly due to Jasper. But elsewhere, in almost all of the tropical zones, it's above average, especially in the southwest Indian Ocean there, very warm compared to usual. And in the eastern Pacific, the El Nino effect is still persisting. The Atlantic, for what it's worth, is quite a bit above average as well, but that doesn't really correlate to tropical cyclones. South Pacific still got a lot of cyclonic heat energy, ocean heat energy I should say, and you can see that there in large areas towards Fiji. Still one little spot in the eastern Pacific and a few areas there in the western Pacific, but a little bit less further south actually near Mindanao. If that system does get going towards there, it might find itself in a little bit of trouble. So let's check the GFS computer models then today. This is what we're expecting then in the Western Pacific. This system starts to take shape as it heads towards Palau and then towards the Philippine Islands. Confidence building again with the models, GFS leading the way. I'm still skeptical on this because it's been crying wolf for many days and weeks at this point, but one or two other models possibly getting on board with it, so certainly something to watch over the next 5 days, and that's a potential landfall there on the 17th, 18th of December. Southwest Indian Ocean looks like we might see rumblings of a potential system here as well. Multiple model support once again. A very small system starting to come out there towards the end of that 5-day period. Nothing much becomes of it early on, but certainly could be looking out quite closely for that one later on in the forecast period. But there it is, quite far up as well in terms of latitude near the equator. Australian region, of course, we're watching Jasper about to make landfall, and it sinks quite a bit southwards there before it does so we could still be looking at a landfall a little bit further south towards Port Douglas, but it does look like it's going to be closer to Cape Tribulation for the potential landfall area. Certainly we'll get some strong winds along the coast and even inland to some areas, indeed places like obviously along the coast near Cairns we could be expecting up to 90 km/h winds sustained. South Pacific, looking at a potential system that could be forming near Samoa. Look in the middle of the picture there it is, a quick spin up from the GFS. The eastern side has the strongest winds, so that batters one or two of the islands of Samoa and then ends up dissipating very quickly, but almost as quickly as it spins up. So low confidence in this so far, but a lot of uncertainty surrounding that one. None of the other models have really picked up on it yet. Looking at rainfall expectations for Jasper then, they're still very high for large areas here, moving inland indeed as well over large parts of the tablelands around the Cairns region. So looking at rainfall expectations, we could be looking at quite substantial amounts, up to and above 400 millimeters still at this point. That's on top of anything that's already occurred. We're expecting maximums at nearly 500 millimeters just south of Cairns, and further north we could be looking at about maybe 4 to 5 inches. That's just over 100 millimeters at Cooktown, and further south towards Townsville we could be looking at around 100 millimeters more there as well. even inland over a lot of those hilly areas, we're still looking at amounts of possibly up to around 300-350 millimeters in one or two spots. So certainly lots of flooding potential there. Into the longer range, we watch that cyclone move through the Philippine Islands, and then it loses its composure very quickly into the South China Sea, as many storms would at this time of year, and then gets hit by that massive wind shield and gets pushed and pummeled down towards the southwest. But certainly initially there, day 5, 6, 7 perhaps, moving through the Visayas region of the Philippines, initially making landfall on the island of Leyte, moving on towards the west, could produce some substantial wind and rain. Watching this southwest Indian Ocean cyclone take shape, well, it certainly does in the medium range on the GFS, and then really strengthens into a substantial cyclone there, category 1, category 2, maybe category 3 as it approaches Mauritius and La Reunion, and then it loses its way a little bit there, not sure what to do. So this is certainly an uncertain scenario. Yesterday, of course, on the bulletin we saw it making pretty much landfall on Mauritius as a category 3, so it's still quite close to that mark, but a lot of uncertainty around that if it deforms at all. Australian region also looking here in that very warm area that we were looking at on the sea surface temperatures. 2 cyclones possibly forming, one of them just off the top end of Australia and the other one pretty much on the other side, not far from East Timor actually. So both of those systems potentially forming later on. It is after the 7-day period, so we haven't marked anything yet, and maybe one of them might be resulting from some of Jasper's remnant energy. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where we have all of our usual items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request, and are still waiting for Hone t-shirts because it's the only basin who have been waiting for 4 years. So in the Scilly range we see the continuation of that cyclone, which looks for a little while as though it's sparing the islands, and it sort of does. I mean, it's really going on a merry dance around there and stalling and not making its mind up throughout that whole period, and eventually it swoons off towards the east and then towards the south. Tropical storm force winds possibly for over a 24-hour period there for parts of Mauritius. Of course, it's very long range though, and we're really not sure what will happen. It might even shoot straight down towards the south if it doesn't get caught up in that weak steering. Now this system off the coast of Australia's top end becomes a very powerful cyclone, dropping into the 920s millibars twice. First just off the Cape York Peninsula, a very odd place, and then moving southwest to reach its full peak of 922 millibars just before reaching Groote Eylandt, just off the coast there of the top end of Australia. So this could be a very powerful Christmas storm for some of those areas, and then swirls towards the southwest, but that's very long range and still might not happen at all. On this day, a storm of a different kind in the Gulf of Carpentaria. It was Cyclone Owen 5 years ago today on December 13th, 2018. We also had the early developments of Tropical Storm Fethai. It's actually not depicted correctly here. It should still be a tropical depression at this point, but it does end up getting that name as it moves on towards the coast of India. But Owen there was just about along its landfall on the coast of the Northern Territory on the western banks of the Gulf of Carpentaria. Well, we're still code yellow for Jasper, nearly code orange actually, so we're still taking it quite seriously. The next name though in the Atlantic, if we did get another one in this year, it will be Vince. In the Eastern Pacific, Selma, and in the Central Pacific it will be Hone, a storm that we've been waiting for since 2019. In the Western Pacific, our next name is Jelawat, and in the North Indian Ocean it will be Remal. 80 storms so far around the world, and it appears as though we might see 1 or 2 more added to this year's name in the next week or two. In the Southern Hemisphere, the next name in the Australian region is Kirali. In the Southwest Indian Ocean, our first name is Alvaro, and in the South Pacific, the next name is Nat. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.